full-time job. I know how that is. I sit on 20 boards, but of course that's what I signed up for. You, on the other hand,
I like the Madam President.
go for it. Small compensation. Right? So, a couple things I'm going to do as my father taught me: be good, be brief, and be gone. I actually set a timer for myself. Woe be it for a politician to stay on time. I like to start with something a little funny. I want to tell you about a woman who died and went to heaven. She got to the pearly gates of heaven, and she sees St. Peter at the pearly gates, and he says, "Welcome to heaven. All you have to do to get into heaven is spell a word correctly." The lady says to St. Peter, "Is there any word in particular?" He says, "No, any word at all." So the lady says, "Okay, love, L-O-V-E. Then he says, "Welcome to heaven, come on in." He goes, "Hold on a minute, I hear somebody calling me, that's Jesus, I gotta go see what he wants. I need you to watch these pearly gates. Same instructions for you that go for anybody else. If someone comes to the gates of heaven, just ask him to spell the word correctly." All of a sudden, the lady's ex-husband showed up. He had just died. She said, "What are you doing here?" He says, "Well, I was in a car accident and I passed away in the hospital." She said, "Okay, well, in order to get to heaven, you've got to spell a word correctly." He said, "Any word in particular?" She goes, "Czechoslovakia." All right, you're awake. Of course, we're all celebrating diversity, and I'm so proud to hear about all of the accomplishments that so many of your organizations have. Congratulations on what you do every day to uplift people. One of the big areas of focus that I've had has been on the formerly incarcerated. And I want to thank you all for what you are trying to do at the national level, hopefully at your local level, to improve access to those who are formerly incarcerated and reintegrating into our society. I happen to chair the Bear County Reentry Council, and it is something that my predecessor, Commissioner Tommy Atkinson, asked me to take great care of. And when I came into office, he said there were 240 businesses who would hire the formerly incarcerated. And I wanted to double that by the end of my first 4 years.
Awesome.
I'm proud to say we have over 800 businesses now that will hire the formerly
That's awesome.
And I want to give a shameless plug. On October the 23rd, I invite you all to have a free HR table at the Second Chance Job Fair at the Freedom Coliseum. And it's not just the formerly incarcerated that comes, everybody comes. There are very few job fairs on the east side. And so this has become a marketing event. Our first year we had 1,800 people. And I will tell you that we had people literally in tears. Literally in tears who had been formerly incarcerated. They said, "You know, we didn't think anybody cared about us. We thought nobody cared about us and would do anything," and they were so happy and overjoyed that they were given an opportunity to get on their feet and become productive members of our society. I don't think there's anything that I do in my elected office that I get more thankful than that job. And so one of the things I will tell you, unsolicited advice, if you want to get a little pickup, come and have a booth there. You will have a lot of folks who are really delighted and eager to work. So this is October the 23rd, 9 a.m. to 12. A table for you is absolutely free. You can call my office at the county. We have some TV ads up on different channels you can see. We have a website where you can register. I'm sorry I don't have all that readily available. Just forget, who is this guy? He's a council. No, I'm not a councilman. Just look up county commissioner. There's only 5 of us, okay? You'll see my picture and you'll have the phone number of the email. Please call my office, 335-2614, 335-2614, and change lives. That's really what we have the opportunity to do, is help people reintegrate and stay home with them. We'd rather have them in a job than in jail. We'd rather have them in a job. Yeah, absolutely. about moving away from the culture of lock them up and throw away the keys to a culture of love, to a culture of acceptance. Sometimes people make mistakes, and my own sister served 11 years, 9 months in the state penitentiary. She got involved in the crowd that mother didn't raise her to get involved. But now she is the manager over at Johnson Controls. She is doing an outstanding job for a lot of folks. So enjoy that particular opportunity for free, October the 23rd, with me at the Freeman. So just in moving the ball a little bit, I've got 9 minutes left.
I like that.
One of the things that I think is important for human resources professionals is to look at where our economy is headed. 25% to 43% of the jobs we have today will be replaced by a computer or robot. Let me repeat that.
Wow.
25 to 43% of the jobs that we have today will be replaced by a computer or robot. But we're still going to need people to program those computers and robots and to fix mechanically. You don't have to necessarily a computer program, but R2D2 needs to be repaired. I'm watching Star Wars. Forgive me, I'm a big dork. But we're not ready as a society for this thing. And you all in HR can do a lot to send the signal. I mean, most companies today are probably up there technology, whether you realize it or not. About a third. Most big companies are about a third technology. And so I foresee, as someone who has an economics background, San Antonio is usually a little technologically behind. I lived in Boston, I lived in India, I lived in France, I lived in Orange County, worked in Sudan, I worked in Denmark, all over the place. We're a little bit behind when it comes to technology. And so what I see happening, unfortunately, we rode out the last recession very well. Part of it is because the county we did 16,000 good-paying construction jobs for flood control, a $500 million flood control program right when the recession hit, and that created a lot of jobs, helped us kind of do better than those cities. This time we don't exactly have anything like that. I'm working to do a $100 million housing bond, which I think would be incredibly stimulative for affordable housing home ownership. But when we come out of this next recession, employers may not replace those jobs with a human being. I mean, I almost fell out when my mother got the robot vacuum cleaner. I have a radio station, and we debuted the world's first artificial intelligence DJ. Okay? Her name was Denise. She was fantastic. She wasn't a prima donna like some of my DJs, but there's nothing, of course, like a person to be able to deal with a lot of our problems and our customer service needs. But the fact of the matter is, you're starting to see it at HEB, you're starting to see it at all kinds of McDonald's, all kinds of stores. And in the very near future, in the next decade, 15 years, there is going to be a robot that's flipping your burger, handing you 4 pounds of cheese and fries, and a robotic mechanical one.
Wow.
What happens to all those folks who have been employed? Look at the movie theaters. You used to have a lot of teenagers and people working in the movie theaters. Not anymore. You got a kiosk, you buy it on your phone, you buy it on your computer. Are you walking with me on this?
Mm-hmm.
We are not ready as a society for this transition from the industrial economy into the information technology economy. So I come here not to scare you that we can't be ready, but to say that all hands really need to be on deck. I need leaders in business like you to advocate that cities and counties become more involved in our schools with the programs that we have. I'm fighting to get teachers certified to teach the kind of basic computer courses that we have hiring here, CompTIA, Network Plus, Security Plus. I don't know what those things mean, but somebody told me they're important, right? And they are. They're where we're beginning at the high school level. You don't necessarily have to have a college degree to be a cyber warrior. We're number 2 in cybersecurity in San Antonio and Bexar County. And Major General Flowers from the Air Force and a gentleman named Tom Daniel has a $2 billion contract with the Department of Defense for cybersecurity said, hey, I can hire an 18-year-old straight out of high school if they have these courses, CompTIA, Network Plus, Security Plus. The schools are teaching some okay computer courses, but they're not necessarily teaching to where the jobs are, right? You probably find this all the time. And he said, if they would do that, I could start them at $18,000 and $35,000, but in 5 years, they will make $100,000. And I represent the eastern half of town. So I have downtown, I have Beacon Hill and Alta Vista, the Pearl, and I have all the areas of Parambio, Selma, Church, Cibolo, Commerce, Greencrest, all the east, down Kansas, North East, and all the southeast past Elmendorf. But I thought about my kids particularly in San Antonio Independent School District, the largest urban school district. As SAISD goes, so goes San Antonio, right? And I thought about $100,000 for families in the inner city, how transformative that would be. So my first 10 months in office, I got the Greater Chamber of Commerce to develop a curriculum. They hired a teacher for those courses to be handed off to our school districts. Now, unfortunately, I hope there's nobody here from SAISD. Is there anybody here from SAISD? Okay, good. The superintendent, when I was talking about, Bexar County Cyber and IT Initiative and cybersecurity, the superintendent sent me the chief of police.
What?
And I called the superintendent. I said, Mr. Superintendent, I don't need your chief of police. I need you or your assistant superintendent for instruction to take this curriculum and begin to work it through your school district, right? So as parents, as community leaders, help me help our community stay strong. The Federal Reserve wrote in 2013 that San Antonio has one of the best economies in the United States, but it is unsustainable if we don't do something about our chronic under-education. We have 25% of our adult population that reads at a 5th grade level. That is third world. No politicians talk about it. I have to give credit to Mayor Ivy Taylor for allocating some money, and I'm pretty much Ivy Taylor and myself. We're the only folks who are really talking about our adult illiteracy rate. It's horrible, okay? And so I'm proud of the commissioner's report. We just allocated another $150,000. We're going to get the Alamo Promise done, which is where every student that wants to go to the Alamo College District, which doesn't just mean you go to college, sometimes it means a certification and skill trade, okay, is free. Universal community college is on the way.
All right.
I led the fight. It's so important. And plus, he's going to be able to save 2 years of college tuition. So I'm very proud of that legacy. We've got to right size, obviously, a lot of job openings. Some of them don't require college degrees. We need to right size those and make sure that people who may have 2/3 of the jobs really don't require some of those. What we tend is folks, I oversee 5,000 employees, 5,000 employees that work for me. I'm statutorily the county manager. We don't necessarily need college degrees for every single one, but if we get them certifications, and those who want to go on to higher education, we absolutely need that in the information technology economy. So this is an inside-outside game. That's the way public policy works, right? Moving government's like moving a battleship. It turns slowly, but we can turn it together. So I know I'm preaching to the choir, and you see the needs of employees and your teams and your associates and those who are coming up in younger generations. I spent some time at Harvard Business School. They sent me one of about 200 leaders from around the United States to take classes at Harvard. And I know that's really bad in the South. Come back and say, I learned at Harvard. But the whole thing was about American competitiveness. We are becoming less competitive in the world. Some people get up and say, I disagree with you, Mr. Thomas. No, I got to tell you, the baby boomers are the last generation where literacy was up from the previous generation. The baby boomers are the last generation where numeracy is up. The baby boomers are the last generation where critical thinking was up from the previous generation.
Yeah.
I'm a millennial. I'm a little bit scared about what's happening in my generation. Millennials were high performing, so those of us kind of in the upper echelon millennials, we are more results oriented, more go-getters than any generation. But those kind of in the middle and towards the lower end are struggling on critical thinking. You see it. I employ people with critical thinking, literacy, numeracy, all those kinds of things. So call on us. There's the alarm. There's the alarm. Call on us when you see these deficits. Texas, unfortunately, has a system that separates local elected officials from school districts and businesses. That's wrong. We all need to work on these issues together. Economic development, our future education, our children, ourselves, we all have to work together. I need to hear from you about what you need. What programs do I need to implement to make your businesses as economically prosperous as possible? Know that I'm here for that. Know that you can call the office and talk to me. And I got that IT initiative done and the curriculum done in my first 10 months in office. A business person came to me. We got it done. Okay. The implementation part is tough because I don't oversee the school districts, right? Like some places, the council or the county commission, board of supervisors, they do have a direction in school districts. I don't know. Maybe it's up for debate. Maybe we should be more connected because at my level, I'm driving the jobs. I'm recruiting the employers. I'm listening. I'm coming to events like this and listening to what you need. And maybe are more connected, right? And even some folks at the academic level. So I just want to say that I'm grateful for the opportunity to address you. I challenge each and every one of you. Don't just stay in that office, but make sure that your businesses remain strong as the information technology economy moves on. Partner with your local elected officials. Partner with your school districts. Hold them accountable. We work for you. So as I close, let me just say, in our lives, none of us could choose what race we'd be. None of us could choose what gender we'd be. None of us could choose who our parents would be. Help us, Lord. But the one thing that we can choose is what to do in our lives. What to do in our lives. And so I challenge you to make the best of every moment. Make the best of this great country. For the most powerful position in our democracy is not the president. It is citizens. It's you. It is me. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you. Big hand again, please.
Yeah.
I do know that you have another appointment that demands your time, so you won't be here for our Q&A section. Would you be willing to take one or two questions?
Let's do it. Yeah, let's do it.
I see a hand shoot up.
Go for it.
I've been holding it. Mr. Albert, you mentioned a very interesting stat. When was it you said that we would be?
The next 15 years.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
I didn't hear the question.
The question was, she said, I laid out a very interesting stat that 25 to 43% of the jobs we have today will be replaced by computers or robots. She was asking me, what is that time frame about the next 15 years? Even lawyers are going to get thrown out of the workforce. And I'm actually serious about that. Let me tell you, the Commissioner's Court, I gave an incentive, an IT incentive, to a company called Easy Expunctions. By the way, if you work with the formerly incarcerated, this is a more affordable way for them to get their records expunged. Most lawyers charge $1,200, right, or thereabouts and up, for an expunction of a record. Easy Expunctions is an online technology company backed by lawyers in the background and legal things, but you just plug it in the app, plug it on the computer, $400. So they became the #1 law firm in the state of Texas in terms of doing expunctions because of technology. Oh yeah, cool, they're your member. So all that to say, that affects business for a lot of lawyers. It takes away business technology. It's disruptive technology is going to take away, God bless them, I'm glad they're lowering the cost. But I'm just saying, that will have an effect on the, and Brother Shapiro and LegalZoom, they're going to come right up on everybody. You got to know, technology is innovative. Yeah.
One more question.
Yes, ma'am.
What industry would you say is the most
who, I love the fact that I've had over 100 employers on the floor of the AT&T Center and the floor of the Coliseum for the Second Chance Job Fair. And I love the fact that I have folks in manufacturing. I love the fact that I've had folks in IT come to hire. I love the fact that I have folks in construction. It's hard for me to say. We have purposely cast a broad net. Now, what I would say is, I just got a text this morning from my chief of staff. They had a meeting. We need more employers this year. We need more employers. So we have spaces for all of you, and I hope, I'd like to see, but, like I said, this job fair is incredibly diverse. Everybody comes. I put out over 20,000 flyers in churches, in civic organizations. I have a ground team that makes sure that people know. And yes, everybody from probation is mandated to come. If they don't have a job, they got to be there. That's a good thing, right? But there's going to be a lot of people. So, obviously things like banking, they're not going to be as prevalent in other jobs where background may affect their hiring. But there are some employers I have bucked a little bit and said, okay, I know you have this, but I actually think you could still employ folks who are formerly incarcerated to really just kind of think back a little bit. I mean, it depends on the offense, right? And then you guys micro-target and try to carve out the jobs for the particular offense. So, I actually don't know. It's been super diverse. But there are sectors I want to go. I think healthcare, I know because of nursing regulations and things like that it's tough, but I still think there could be more in healthcare that hire. So if you're from one of those kinds of agencies, you're welcome. Any business.
Thank you so much. And we need employees.
Can I just say this? She said, we need employees. One of the things that people love about coming to my job fair, I didn't know this, they told me the employers. They said, people are actually looking for jobs at your job fair. She said to me, sometimes people are just coming to look, right? You guys know this. I'm not an HR. You know, they're just coming to look, and they're not really interested in the job. But when you come to my job fair, they're really looking, right, for a job. So just know that. It's not a waste of your time, okay? All right, thank you.
Tommy, we would like to present you with an appreciation. We have in your name donated to the SHRM Foundation, which is an educational foundation to help those seeking to better themselves and educate themselves. Yes, thank you. Thank you again for Tommy. And that was our keynote. Now the next part of our program is we're going to have a panel of experts that are in the field of diversity, in the trenches, practicing it every day. So at this point, I'm going to introduce our panel for you to hear one by one. Our first panelist that I would like to introduce to you is Mr. Phil Bolender. Phil is an experienced and enthusiastic global organizational development leader. He has expertise in business transformational consulting and leadership development coaching. He is going to speak to how coming out was crucial to his career. Please welcome Mr. Phil Bollinger.
There's people, process, and technology. I'm really good at people, I'm really good at process, and I am crap at technology. Usually at home, it goes something like this. My husband's name is Michael. Michael, it's not doing what it's supposed to. All right. So this morning, as I was doing this, two things came up. One, I was very, very emotional going through this another time this morning. So I just warned you ahead of time there may be some emotions that come through, and that's just the way that it is. The other thing is, I thought 38 years and 10 minutes. It's like the Cher concert that you go to over and over again because she tries to do 7 decades in the final concert, right? So anyway, I'll try to do it. I'll try to do it justice. So by a show of hands, if you're comfortable, how many of you in this room have had an indirect or direct experience with coming out? And let me just preface this. Coming out not only includes the LGBTQ community, it also includes people who are coming out of abusive relationships, addiction, financial situations that may not be esteeming or supportive. So by a show of hands, how many of you have either directly or indirectly been involved in a coming out experience? Just raise your hand if you're comfortable. All right, now look around. The reason that I do this is, and ask this, is because coming out for me was the journey of a gay man coming out in 1981, and I know some of you weren't here in 1981, so I'll give you some context. It was an interesting time. The reality is that coming out is universal. Each and every one of us has something that we come out about each and every day. And what's interesting is the more I watch TV, the more I see the term coming out being used for all these different things. So with that in mind, let's go ahead and get started here. I've got some slides because I know there's visual learners in the room, and I want to make sure that I explain to you all. How many people know who these two people are? Raise your hand if you know who these people are. Okay, sir, did you raise your hand or were you putting your jacket on? Okay, there you go. Yes. Amy? Yes, Amy was fired from the Harris Funeral Homes. Yes, exactly. And I'm sorry to point. Do you know who the other person is?
No, it's actually Harris Funeral Home.
Sorry?
Harris Funeral Home was the one that I knew.
Okay, and does anyone know who Scott is? Okay, so Scott was also terminated for his job. This is an issue of gender identity and sexual orientation. So each of them right now today, and this is where it might get a little bit emotional, because on this day right now as we're sitting here, their arguments are being heard at the Supreme Court. They were terminated, one for transgender and one for, a part of his employment was he was required to put down his next of kin. They chased after him to the point where he finally put it down and provided them with a marriage certificate to his husband, and then he was terminated for identifying his husband as his next of kin. So the reason I do what I do is because these experiences are still out there. So let's go to 1981. This is a flashback. I debated whether or not to put this out there. This was not a selfie. There was a kind person standing next to me who took this photo.
In 81.
And I got the biggest kick out of it when I looked at it. I was like, yeah, you could actually think that was a selfie back in 1981. So the point here is that I came out in corporate in 1981. Now, for those of you who weren't here in 1981, or those of you who remember it, it was not a very good time for the LGBT community. AIDS was an epidemic. There were a lot of fears. In fact, I remember going into Houston and wanting to rent an apartment with my partner, and I was told it was illegal for us to rent a one-bedroom apartment. So that's sort of the environment that we were living in at the time. People were being terminated for nothing more than showing up at work and having a picture of their partner on the desk, or mentioning on the weekend they went out with their partner, and on Monday they didn't have a job anymore. So this was me in 1990-something, and it was at the Gay Pride Parade in New York, and it was one of the most exhilarating experiences for me to be able to get to do that, because I brought the confidence that I had there back to my career, back to my job. So let me talk a little bit, this one's even earlier. Again, when I looked at this morning, I was like, they're going to think I was still in high school. I wasn't. So what happened here was, I firmly believe that being out is irrelevant to my career. Now, that may not hold true for others. For me, what I did was I relied on the PIE. How many of you know what the PIE model is? Performance, image, and exposure. All right, we got a couple. So this came out in the 1990s. Coleman, I think, was the author of the book. So I got a hold of this book, and this book taught you all about get your performance, image, and exposure in line, and then your career will go. So what I did was I did that along with having allies and sponsors. So what happened was I was in an area that was in complete disarray. Is that too loud if I hold it up here?
That's good.
Yeah, okay. So what happened was I went into this area that was in complete disarray. I was the manager of it. It was in chaos. None of the metrics were being made. The organization was, it was the worst of everything. So imagine in your mind the worst experience in terms of leaders, process, all that type of stuff, and I went in to run it. So when I went in to run it, one of the first things I did was start to form sub-teams. And in forming these sub-teams, I listened to people, I talked to people, I found out what was going on. So this was really a pivotal moment in my career, because what happened was, we were able to take a cycle that was normally 31 days, and now mind you, we were only meeting about 40% of it in 31 days. Take that 31 days and process it down to 21 days as the goal, so that we had a 10-day buffer. That 10-day buffer made sure that we met the 31, and then the end-to-end process would continue on. So what happened with that was, I was asked to take it to 2 other offices in New Jersey and California. And in fact, in California, the insurance commissioner was threatening to close down the organization, and this came in and was actually part of the solution. So the recognition that I got was Employee of the Month. Now it's really interesting looking at this, because it wasn't once, it was twice. I was Employee of the Month once because of the work that I did to lead this team, and we as a team were named Employee of the Month, which was the first time ever. And then the team that I worked with in Houston, who supported this change, and believe me, they went kicking and screaming, and then they were the biggest cheerleaders, they nominated me. So the reason I bring this up is, nothing about my sexual orientation had anything to do with that experience. It was about how I showed up, what I did, and the performance image and exposure is what got the results that they were looking for. And I'm happy to say that all throughout my career, I took the most challenging, high-risk roles in order to prove that I could do the undoing, right? The things that couldn't be done, I went in and did them.
Cool.
Sorry? Was that a cool?
That was a cool.
Okay, thank you. So, the idea there is that I'm doing all this work. Now I'm working for four Fortune 100 companies, at least 5 or 6 of them in a row, where I'm doing these intense turnarounds. So people, process, and technology. 2006, I wake up, I'm completely worn out, in despair, depressed, anxious, can't sleep. And I'm like, what the heck am I going to do next? What I realized was, if I continue to work at the rate that I was, because let's face it, I could be an overachiever, I was going to have a heart attack, stroke, or die. On the other side, if I stopped working, I was going to lose everything. So I had to go through this internal conflict, and I decided what better thing to do than to leave my career and take a break from it. Now, a lot of people, how many of you have ever taken a break from your career for 6 months or longer? All right, good for you. It's very rare in corporate. So I took this break, and I decided to find the balance between my ego and my spirit. These are things we don't talk about in the workplace. However, I knew if I kept on the path of my ego was going to destroy me. So I had to figure out a way to get that ego to work with my spirit, because my work is really important to me, especially when it comes to people. So I got to go to places like Kenya and Bali and some others, and I made my own Eat, Pray, Love. So my eat was to go to Brazil, because I love Brazil. And then I went to, let's see, Brazil was eat, Bali was pray, because it's an amazingly spiritual place to be. If you've been there, you understand it. And then my love was working in the orphanages for the AIDS children, the children of victims of AIDS in Kenya. While there, I got to be on holiday, and I got to live out one of my dreams, which is to be a pastry chef for a day. So that was pretty exciting. And again, they didn't ask me about my sexual orientation. They asked me who I am, what's important to you, and so on and so forth. So again, it's not about showing up around the sexual orientation. We were talking earlier about how some people put it out there in a, in your face kind of thing. I never had to do that. I wouldn't do that. So I come back to corporate America, and this is my view of the world for 5 years, looking out the window of an airplane at the wings, traveling at the rate of about 125,000 miles a year, because I went into one job that was all about leadership development that allowed me to work globally, and then I went into a manufacturing role, because everything I'd done before was service. Now I'm in manufacturing, and I'm flying all around the world trying to figure out how to work in factories in China and Mexico and so on and so forth. So that was my path for about 5 years. The good news is that while I was doing that, I had a lot of time to reflect on what I was doing and realize that my passion is about people and process. It's about people and process. So 2017, I decided to launch my company, Seed and Lead. When I launched Seed and Lead, I was all in, just like everything else. So that's my company, that's my tagline, and I continue to work my purpose, which is all about diversity and inclusion, LGBTQ. It's all about the universal of coming out. So one of the things you get to do as an entrepreneur is you get to create your own schedule, and you also get to do the things that are most important to you. So what I realized was there was a book in me for 10 years that hadn't come out. So what happened was I wrote a book, and then I wrote another book, and I wrote another book. So I've written 4 books, and I have a 5th one coming out. And as a result of that, there was a press release that was put out on the book that went to, are you ready for this? 49 million people. When my book person called me and told me that, I was like, there's 49 million people out there that know about this book now. So the idea there is I have freedom and flexibility to do the things that I want, and if you go to the Goodman Project, there are stories about my experience. There are stories about the way I look at leadership, the way I look at coming out, the way I look at allies, the way I look at pretty much everything except baking a chicken. So what's really important about this is that, again, I'm not listed as a gay author. I am an author. I'm a leader, right? I don't lead with that. So this is what I get to do now. I get invited to things like this, events like this, where I get to speak. I get to share my story. If you would have told me in 1981 that I would stand on a stage and I would share my coming out story, and the 38 years that followed after it, I would have said to you, it's not possible. It's not possible. What I will tell you is, it is possible, and you can actually defy everything that comes in your way and be phenomenally successful at it. 5 continents, 20 countries, 2 industries, 5 Fortune 100 companies. I mean, when people introduce me like Cora did, I'm like, who is that guy? So I get to do all of this, and I was just recently at an event. I had my mom there. It was the most amazing experience to have my mom in the room with me and giving her credit for raising me the way I am. All right, so I'm closing out. National Coming Out Day. How could I leave that out, right? Literally. Friday is National Coming Out Day. It is celebrated. It's celebrated for the fact of the people who have come out in the LGBT community. It's also celebrated for the allies and the sponsors that are surrounding us, who I'm extremely grateful to. So there's an event at Mission Marquee on Friday. If you want to see me on the big screen, they videotape me. I'm going to be up on the big screen. So telling my story similar to this one. I am humbled, I am honored, and I'm clearly going to cry all the way home this afternoon.
So I'm getting ready to introduce our next panelist, and I do want everybody to know there are index cards on the table that you're welcome to write a question, and we'll collect those. But after all of the panelists speak, we're going to open it up for questions, and we're going to bring them all back up to answer questions. So you can either just stand and ask your question, or you are welcome to write a question. There are index cards on all of the tables. So you will get to see and fill it in. Isn't he wonderful? Another hand for Bill. Thank you. Our next panelist is Lorraine Williams. She is a registered nurse and has been for 6 years. She currently is working with post-surgical unit, and she's been employed there for 2 years. She's also pursuing her Master's of Social Work at Our Lady of the Lake. Her goal is to work with those who have autism. She is also a volunteer at the Autism Community Network. She is going to speak to us today about her experience on research with autism and autism in the workplace. Please give a very warm welcome to Laura.
For those of you who can't see, this is a very simple silver necklace with a letter L on the charm. My nephew, who's 3 years old and on the autism spectrum, picked it out for me last Christmas. He knows his letters very well. He is what doctors would call hyperlexic. He learned his alphabet and learned to read very early. This shows up sometimes with people on the autism spectrum. I tell this story because he was very insistent that his Aunt Lorraine have the necklace with the letter L on it. This makes me the very first woman, besides his mother, that he's ever picked out jewelry for. I wanted to wear it today when I gave my speech. I had it on my dresser. I haven't worn it in a while because as a nurse I don't usually wear long dripping jewelry. Of course, in the time it's been on my dresser, it's managed to get all tangled up, so I spent all morning untangling it. So now, my necklace and I are ready to speak to you about the challenges autistic adults face in the workplace, as well as strengths they can bring to the job. We'll also be discussing ways in which leaders can maximize these strengths to benefit the company. Autism spectrum disorder, or ASD, is a developmental disorder characterized by challenges in 3 major areas: socialization, repetitive behaviors, and sensory processing. As you can see, it's a wide spectrum, encompassing people with a variety of differences. For example, someone with autism may have trouble speaking, or they may have trouble knowing when to stop speaking. They may become highly fixated on the same routine, or engage in the same repetitive movements over and over. They may not respond to sensory stimuli as much as a neurotypical person, or they may be over-responsive. Autism is often seen as a children's disease with an emphasis on early diagnosis. However, once a child with autism reaches adulthood, there's a dramatic decrease in representation from charities, from the news media, and even fictional media like books and movies. As a result, a lot of people don't really know what happens to autistic kids when they grow up. Perhaps they outgrow their autism, or turn into brilliant but socially inept physicists like Sheldon Cooper, or sheltered people living repetitive lives like Rain Man. But we don't come to work to discuss the healthcare outcomes of people on the spectrum. We come in to do our jobs and hopefully to make our companies profitable. Therefore, when we hear jaw-dropping statistics like 85% of American adults with autism are unemployed, or hear that 500,000 people with ASD are due to enter the workforce in the next decade, we shouldn't be thinking about Rain Man or Sheldon Cooper. As employees, managers, and HR professionals, we should think of only one word when we hear about autism in the workplace. That one word is disruptive. Employees with autism are disruptive. They have the potential to change widely accepted processes for job interviews, office communication, and workflow. Your company needs this disruption. The changes seen in autism can be an asset to the workplace. Again, this is a wide spectrum, and our presentation will hit the highlights. People with autism speak in a way that is honest and straightforward, leading to clearer communication. They often take comfort in repetition, making them great candidates for jobs that require rigorous adherence to a specific protocol and high attention to detail. They have an orderly approach to their work, which helps them cope with an often unpredictable world. Employees with ASD face workplace challenges due to 4 major differences. Their challenges with sensory processing and repetitive behaviors, their very literal use of language, their propensity for going off on conversational tangents, and other people's perceptions of them as rude. People with autism can be very sensitive to sensory stimuli. This includes input from all 5 senses. For example, they may be highly reactive to bright lights, noisy offices, and certain fragrances. Additionally, they may be very uncomfortable with certain types of touch, such as a hand on the shoulder or a handshake. Be sensitive to these sensory differences. Avoid walking up behind the employee and grabbing their shoulder. Also, allow them to work in a quiet area. Oops, did I change it? Okay. Allow them to work in a quiet area. Wear headphones and dim the lights if necessary. If the employee has to do something involving a lot of sensory input, such as attending a loud, crowded meeting, give them time for a sensory break, time for themselves in an area with very little stimulation. People with autism often thrive on routine and can be very upset when their everyday routine is altered. They may also engage in repetitive movements called stimming to help them cope with everyday stressors. Stimming can include things like pacing, rocking, or hand flapping. Differences in sensory processing, adherence to routine, and stimming all come under the heading of restrictive repetitive behaviors, or RRBs. Both during the interview and on the job, keep the candidate or employee in the loop as much as possible. This helps them know what to expect and can help them process any unexpected changes. Companies should adhere to the employee's routine as much as possible. For example, an employee may take their lunch break at noon every day, no matter what. Some jobs may be better able to accommodate this than others. If accommodation is not possible or if schedule changes occur, this should be communicated clearly in a timely manner. Ideally, the employee should be given time to decompress, to engage in stress-reducing activities to help cope with the schedule change. Don't sweat it if an employee starts stimming. These movements are comparable to a neurotypical person using a stress ball or twirling their hair. They help calm the person, allowing them to focus on the task at hand. Differences in sensory processing and repetitive behaviors can be a boon in the workplace. Many autistic employees take comfort in repetitive tasks like data entry and filing, which their neurotypical coworkers find boring. They are able to meticulously follow the same routine over and over, allowing for reduced completion time and fewer errors. They have no tolerance for chaos or disorganization. This can lead them to solve problems that others ignore. This allows for increased efficiency and reduced errors. People with autism often speak very literally and expect others to do the same. As you can see from the cartoon, they have trouble understanding figurative language, nonverbal cues, or subtle hints. If you find yourself in a situation like this one, don't get mad like the boss in the picture. Instead, rephrase your question or statement using more precise language. Literal language and other communication differences seen in ASD are big issues in job interviews. I'd be happy to discuss this topic in depth when I have more time. People with autism often have trouble giving a short answer to seemingly simple questions. They are very thorough and want to make sure they've given you all the information you could possibly need. Additionally, they can talk for hours about their special interests. As with any very talkative coworker, politely interrupt and bring the conversation back on topic. You can then rephrase the question to be more specific. For example, instead of saying, "Tell me about yourself," you could ask, "What are your duties at your current job?" Employees with autism may come across as rude. They may be seen as overly blunt. It's worth noting that what's considered necessary bluntness in one situation may be considered rude in another. For example, if you work in a hospital and someone's giving CPR the wrong way, feedback would have to be more blunt with fewer social niceties than if someone were simply filling out their TPS reports incorrectly. People with autism don't mean to be rude. If they do something rude, their manager should give them clear, specific feedback. Saying something like, "Be more polite to your coworkers," is too vague. The autistic employee generally tries to be polite, but they often have trouble understanding where they're falling short. You need to be specific. For example, you can say, The next time you discover a coworker has made a mistake, speak to them privately about it in their office, rather than in the break room, surrounded by several other coworkers. This gives the employee a specific action to take. Socialization differences can benefit the business. Having clear, literal communication with nothing between the lines reduces misunderstandings and can benefit all employees, not just those with ASD. In conclusion, employees with autism benefit the workplace by exhibiting increased focus and providing clearer communication. This leads to greater productivity and profits. One last thing, everyone look under their chairs for an envelope. There should be a blue envelope taped to the bottom of one of the chairs. One lucky winner will be going home with a $25 gift card to Shelby Sweets. They're a nonprofit bakery that provides vocational training to people with disabilities. Did you find it? Oh, no, it's a blue envelope. That's not mine. It should be a blue envelope. I'm sorry, I have no idea what that is. Oh! Yes, awesome, you're the winner. Shelby Sweets is a nonprofit bakery. It provides vocational training to people with disabilities. Right now, they're all volunteer, but they're trying to get enough money to bring on employees, so maybe they can win an award here next year. Thank you.
They do some cool drawings for 4th of July.
Another big
Two
hand.
rooms,
Thank you,
and three.
ladies.
That was nice.
Did anybody learn anything today about autism?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Incredible.
But wait, there's more. Our next panelist is Serafina de los Santos. She is the Executive Director of the 502 Force Support Group at JBSA Fort Sam Houston. And she is here to speak to us about smoothing that transition from military into the private sector. I can't wait. Come on up, Serafina.
Wow, it's hard to follow that. I mean, two great speakers. I'm really honored to be speaking on the same panel as you are. And I see lots of friends, you know, because in Military City, USA, we travel in packs, you know. And so all the work and all the outreach that I'm doing on behalf of our transitioning service members, spouses, and even dependent children, I get to see a lot of you where I go. So good to see you here. I'm so excited to be here. I don't have slides. I wrote down my thoughts, and I just turned 60 this year, so I really have to focus on notes because I forget some words. So please bear with me. But I'm excited to be here because you are my favorite professionals in the city of San Antonio. So today, I'm here to help you, help us, help our transitioning service members and military spouses and veterans find gainful employment and become a valued member of your organization. You are the gatekeepers to corporate America, so we need you to give us the passcode. In turn, we hope to educate you on how to assimilate us into your corporate world. So let's start where we always start, and that is encouraging employers to hire us. And by the way, when I say us and me and we, it's because I'm a veteran. I served both in the Air Force and I retired from the Army in 2004. So I know so we know, and I hope that you know, the value of hiring a veteran. Words that you often hear describing veterans are team players, leaders, strong work ethic, problem solvers, can think on their feet, disciplined, timely, possess technical skills, honest, pays attention to detail, and possess a global perspective, because we PCS all over the world. We always get transferred somewhere else. And rest assured that these qualities I'm talking to you are true. But I will add that those attributes also apply to military spouses, and words I also use for them is agile, multitaskers, strong, independent, and resourceful. Because now we're also including military spouses in our outreach. So let's start with some definitions. I looked up some definitions that Sherman uses. That inclusion is the achievement of a work environment in which all individuals are treated fairly and respectfully, have equal access to opportunities and resources, and can contribute fully to the organization's success. So I believe that all companies really aspire to do this. So when you hire a veteran or a military spouse, I'm fully confident that they will be afforded all the opportunities and resources that they require to succeed in your organization. So diversity, as Sherm defines it, is the collective mixture of differences and similarities that includes, for example, individual and organizational characteristics, values, beliefs, experiences, backgrounds, preferences, and behaviors. Again, I believe that employers also aspire to create a work environment that accepts their employees' diversity. However, this is where it can get a bit sticky as it relates to hiring a veteran. Because when you hire a veteran and fitting them into your corporate culture, it's a little challenging sometimes. Why? Because veterans bring a lifestyle with them that is based on a strict sense of values, behaviors, beliefs, and characteristics. For example, we can be perceived as too rigid. We're also used to clearly defined career progression. So in the military, we know when we have a promotion board coming up. We know what we need to do to get promoted to the next rank. We are used to defined roles, rank and status in the workplace. We are used to having chains of command. We are used to calling superiors ma'am or sir, or in turn being called ma'am or sir. We are used to disciplined environments, and sometimes our body language may be off-putting, myself included. I have this face. Sometimes they tell me I look too rigid. And when we are thrust into a new and different environment where all of a sudden we have choices, it can be a bit daunting. Or even calling your boss by their first name. I even have trouble with that since I've been retired, having my employees call me Serafina. And I kind of cringe, but I go with the flow. And I call them, by their first name. Or how about the fact that maybe your company allows people to wear shorts and flip-flops, or I don't know if that's too much for San Antonio, but it can happen. But I guess you get the point, So when we come into your organization, it's a challenge for us. But so you hired a veteran, now what? How does a company practice diversity and inclusion when dealing with veterans in the workplace? And I'm not delusional. I know we can come with some baggage. However, I can tell you that assimilating and developing a veteran to work to their potential and make them a contributing member of your organization is not hard. Employers simply need to recognize that we do face challenges when coming into a non-military environment. These challenges are not shortcomings, because we still possess all the skills and talent that attracted us to you in the first place. So what can employers do to create a welcoming, inclusive environment for veterans? Well, first I would recommend developing mentorship programs using other veterans in your company that have made it to welcome them to your new organization, through newcomers orientations. Allow veterans in your organization to create veteran support groups, which may help them develop a sense of camaraderie that they may need. You should celebrate and encourage and acknowledge your veterans. And you can celebrate the service's military birthdays, for example, the Army birthday, the Navy birthday, the Air Force birthday, and encourage all employees, not just veterans, to participate, whether veterans or not, and make it fun where they can choose a service to go behind and say, no, I'm going to go choose the Army, or I'm going to go choose the Navy birthday, or maybe they choose all of them. Employees, whether veterans or not, need to be part of the process. Perhaps incorporate, as I said, a newcomer's orientation aimed at your veteran hires. Provide them with a roadmap to assimilation. Acknowledge their diversity and help them peel off that veneer. Companies large and small can do their part to integrate all veterans into their corporate culture. For example, some of the companies here locally, USAA has a VetNet, an employee resource support group that is very active, and they volunteer at JBSA. And they volunteer throughout Military City. Rackspace has RackVet, and CPS has VetConnect, to name but a few examples. But I don't want you to think of this as another diversity group that you have to acknowledge, because your company can add veteran recognition events to a long list that you already have. But again, it's about accepting them into your culture. But one word of caution, do not tip the scales and make it all about the veterans in your organization, because this could also create an opposite effect. It can create resentment or ostracize your employees that were never in the military but served in other ways. You do not want to make it about making your veterans special because you allow support groups or because you add to the newcomers orientation. You simply want to make it about creating an inclusive and diverse environment. At the end of the day, we can be an asset to your organization and we can become part of the team. So take a chance on us. Hire us. If you really want to help us, then embrace and acknowledge our differences. I will close by saying that we're not entitled to having you hire us. And you will never hear me say, you must hire a veteran. Because at the end of the day, you need to do what is right for your organization. But I will say this, if a company really wants to embrace diversity and inclusion in their workplace, they can do it by hiring veterans. And they can throw in a military spouse or two for good measure. But thank you for your consideration. Thank you for hiring veterans and military spouses, and thank you for allowing me to be here today. I'm wearing a skirt on my trip. Philippine Look, she does what she's told. Would they be able to get a hold of you if they had questions? Absolutely. Perfect, okay. Can you go sit down? Lorraine, would you please join us back up here? If you have questions for any of our panelists, please be writing them on the index or be prepared to stand and ask. And Phil, would you also please? I have an alibi. I'm on LinkedIn, and if you want to connect with veterans and transitioning service members and spouses, please, I'm going to turn my LinkedIn on, you should turn your LinkedIn on, and we can all become friends.
Cute.
So if everybody would like to turn their LinkedIn Connect on right now, you can connect with whoever is in this room. So
I love LinkedIn.
So Seraphina's going to turn her LinkedIn on right now, and you can.
So you go to the little people, you go to the little person on your LinkedIn, and you go to the little there and go, turn it on. It says,
I don't know. I'm on LinkedIn every day and I have no idea what you're talking about.
It's like herding squirrels.
On your little person. Discover more.
Does anybody have any written questions for us
Go
to
to your little
collect?
person.
Does anybody have any questions for the panel?
It's so
Right.
go to your little person. God, I don't know what that means. Oh, here.
It's not a question.
It's not a question.
Or was it here at the
Do you
top?
want to
where
talk
you
to
hit
Steve?
your profile?
Thank you.
Did anybody figure it out?
No.
We're all struggling here.
I just wanted to say what a fabulous job. I learned so much today from, Phil, of course, and Lorraine, and then also from Ms. Serafina? So anyway, I just wanted to say fantastic job. I just learned so much from you guys. Very much.
Alright, you ready to
I do have one question while the rest of you are thinking. Bill, what do you want employees or managers to consider when an employee announces intentions to come out as a transgender?
The first word that comes to mind is support. Rally around the individual, give that individual every opportunity to be supported through the experience. I will tell you over and over again, allies and sponsors were the reason that I had the career that I had. Yes, I did my performance, however, they were the ones that were surrounding me and supporting me throughout that 35 years, so make sure there's support.
What other questions?
Is your Bluetooth on? Yeah.
I actually did have a question. I had a question for, Lorraine. Lorraine? Yes. So, Lorraine, I have a nephew who is, on the spectrum. Brilliant kid. He's 26. But anyway, he just can't find a job. He's in the DFW area. What type of advice would you give somebody like him or somebody like me as an ally trying to help him find employment? Are there agencies or particular employers?
I don't know much about the DFW area, but I know we have the Texas Workforce Commission. I believe here in San Antonio, the Easter Seals helps with employment for people who have disabilities. And there's another one, I think it's like Alamo Council of Governments. I think that was the other one in San Antonio. I don't know much about the Dallas-Fort Worth area specifically, but I'm sure it's a big city, so there'll be resources online.
Yeah.
But as far as, yeah, looking for a job, I'd look into that.
Thank you.
Other questions for the panel? You have a question? Oh, Bruce, wait. Yes.
So my question is for Serafina. We recently had a, oh, sorry, thank you. My question is for Serafina. Recently had a veteran join our team and then leave our team because he got another opportunity. So we were really pleased for him, but sad for us. And one of the things that he said to me as he was leaving was, "Thank you for making the transition easy." And I was honestly kind of baffled because I thought, I don't know that I did anything in particular. So I'm curious, are there any practical tips that you have about specific things to do to welcome a transitioning veteran to your team?
Yes, so one of the things that I'm trying to educate, HR professionals and even employers is just a little bit of what I said earlier is just creating that path, and knowing maybe you have a program in place where you may have some sort of newcomers orientation targeted at veterans specifically about what the roadmap looks like. And we are sorry that sometimes our veterans that transition out seem to be job hopping, but I think that it's caused by two things. Number one is that when it's scary because they might not have a job and an income for their family, so sometimes they jump at the first thing that they can get. But the other thing, when they start working, they realize maybe that wasn't for them. So what the Department of Defense has started is a career skills program initiative. And what that does is within 180 days of that transitioning service member leaving the military, they can go and work with with an employer. And what I like to say to employers and to our transitioning service members is that you take each other for a test drive. For example, they get to spend some time in your company, and they might say, you know what, and they're still on our payroll, by the way, they're paid by us. They can say, I don't, this is not something I really, feel like I want to do, but then it's a win-win because you as an employer have helped them realize that, and two, they have realized that it's not for them, so no money is wasted other than some time and some mentorship. So if your employers out there are interested in taking some of our transitioning service members, work with us on that. But the other one is a challenge. Yes, it's about them realizing their forever job, if you will. But thank you for that, because we do see that a lot.
Would we be able to connect with that service through, like, the Red, White, and U TWC?
Hi, I'm sorry. Would you be able to connect? Will you be participating in the TWC's?
You can connect through the Career Skills Program through me because it falls in my job jar. I would say that's one of my side gigs.
Okay.
This is not my real job, but I do that for my passion. But if you are interested in the Career Skills Program and how you can take an intern or two in your company, please see me. Or if you want to do anything with Joint Base San Antonio, please see me. We're open for business.
Well, thank you for the panel. We appreciate you. if you